Good evening, everybody. This is one of our innovation and engagement public lectures, and we're delighted to introduce Chris Jones, who is the Chief Executive of Welsh Water, which is the largest social enterprise in Wales today, and celebrating its 12th birthday, which Chris will go on to talk about. Why this is so interesting for us is because it overcomes the sterile debate between public or private. Welsh Water is neither public nor private, it's social. It's socially owned for its customers and the people of Wales, which is what Chris will talk about. So will you join me, please, in welcoming Chris Jones this evening?
Well, thank you, Kevin. Noswaith dda, bawb. Diolch yn fawr iawn am y gwahoddiad I fod efo chi heno. Thanks very much for the invitation to join you this evening. Really do appreciate it. Can I say just well done for not being put off by those awful posters with my picture on. It's rather disconcerting as you come in and, crikey, see yourself staring back at you out of the flyer. So I'm glad you weren't put off by that. I just want to talk for a bit about Welsh Water, Dwr Cymru in Welsh, and how we ended up being this rather unusual sort of enterprise, one that is owned and financed in Wales on behalf of its customers. So it's not a shareholder company like I think all the other utilities in the UK in one form or another. It is, as Kevin says, a social enterprise, or mutualism if you like. So just to start off, I thought I'd share with you a little film that we had done when recently the rugby stadium in Cardiff, which I'm sure you all know, asked us to help them with some advice on how to reduce their water bills so they've got more money to spend on players. So we thought that was a good thing to do, so we went along and helped them, and they were so pleased with the amount of money we were able to save them by using the water. They said, well, look, would you like to have an advert in half-time during the Wales-England match? And we thought, well, we don't normally do advertising, that'll be quite exciting. So Hayley, my colleague down there, suddenly has got a budget to produce an advert for the first time, and so on. So we came up with a little film which tells you a little bit about why the company is different. This is what showed at half-time.
Dwr Cymru, Welsh Water, is a not-for-profit company. We don't have shareholders. The people that matter to us are the 3 million customers we serve every day, and the environment in which they live. We're currently investing £1.5 billion to improve our services for the future, to provide clean drinking water, protect homes from flooding, and look after our environment. We fix over 2,000 blockages a month, helping to reduce the risk of flooding in homes, and are making every effort to keep our rivers and beaches some of the cleanest in the UK. We've even secured the lowest bill increases in England and Wales, so the only ones who benefit are the people we serve and our environment. After all, it's your water, not ours. Welsh Water, not for profit. For you.
What do you think about that? It's quite unusual for us to do a piece of company sort of propaganda like that, but I am pleased to say, apologies to any English people in the audience, but it had the desired effect, because at half-time in the game, it was very close. It was Wales 9, England 3, and Sir Clive Woodward was on the TV saying, oh no, England have got this one, stronger bench, they'll come back and win this in the second half. But as it happened, the England front row was so confused by the fact that Welsh Water is a not-for-profit company. They were coming back out and saying, well, how do they finance the business? And I think it's collateralized debt obligations and so on. And basically their whole team fell apart in the second half, and Wales won by 30 points to 9. So if nothing else, that video played a small part in that piece of history. Talking of history, this is the background to the company. Welsh Water. It was privatised. Previously, it was a government-owned company, like the 10 big sort of government-owned companies in England and Wales. and it was privatised in 1989. So this is going back to the era of sort of Thatcher privatisations in the UK, British Gas, the electricity companies, British Airways, the airports, those sorts of things. So about 5 or 6 years on from that, there was quite a trend in the UK for utility companies to diversify, to merge, etc. And actually the Welsh Water parent company bought the South Wales electricity parent company and formed a new group called Hyder plc. That, as I say, was a sort of a popular sort of thing to do at the time. There were other sort of mergers of utilities and expansions around the globe. But unfortunately, and for any business students in the audience, you know, one of the key issues in business life is to learn where the top of the market is. And unfortunately, when your advisors come and tell you that everybody has bought their local energy company, so you must do the same, that's probably a good sign that you're buying at the top of the market. You know, there was a good deal to be done, but it was a few years before. So Hyder ended up buying South Wales Electricity, but taking on a mountain of debt in the process. And when the regulatory system became much tougher in the year 2000, that left that conglomerate very exposed. And again, for those who don't know how regulation of utilities works in the UK, basically there are industry regulatory bodies that are independent. They're not government, they're non-governmental public bodies. In our case, it's called Ofwat, and Ofwat set the prices, service standards, etc. for these private monopoly companies in 5-year sort of periods. So in the year 2000, Ofwat had a tough review of the water sector. Offer, as it was at the time, had a tough review of the energy sector, and the Hyder plc was left in a very exposed position. And that's where the sort of Glas Cymru Welsh Water sort of story starts, because by quirk of fate, there were two individuals working within Hyder. I was a director of Welsh Water and South Wales Electricity at the time. My background, partly from government, I've been in the Treasury and so on, and partly from city, so worked on finance, economics, etc., various privatisations, industry restructurings, etc. So I was there, and a colleague of mine, a guy called Nigel Annett, he was also an ex-merchant banker. Saying you're an ex-banker in those days was not quite the sort of term of opprobrium that it is today. So anyway, we were two ex-bankers working for a utility company, and we thought, well, actually, this structure isn't going to last. It's going to have to be unwound. Somebody's going to have to buy these constituent businesses and recapitalise them. And so we started thinking about, well, how did we think the best way to do that would be? And we decided actually what we wanted to do was to create a new style company. So it would be a private company, but financed entirely by debt, so bonds, long-term bonds. So it wouldn't have any shareholders, and it would be able to focus, therefore, just on what was in the best interests of this business, this essential utility business for the long term. So we created a shell company in 2000. And put in a bid to buy Welsh Water from the Hyder Group. And I think at the time this was regarded as a slightly audacious thing to do, because basically we had two individuals. We didn't have an office, so we worked out of the cowshed where in the old farm where I live. We had 2 laptops and 2 mobile phones, and a letter from Barclays Bank saying we promise to lend these guys £1.9 billion if you'll sell them Welsh Water. So that was basically what we went off to the board of Hyder with. And it's one of those odd things in life that if we'd gone to our local branch of Barclays and said, I'd like, £1,900 to set up a cheese shop, they'd have said no chance. But if you said, £1.9 billion and there's loads of bankers' fees in this for you, then absolutely everybody loves you. So, go for the big ask is another lesson I've learned. Anyway, we put in our bid to buy Welsh Water from Hyder, and ultimately that was unsuccessful. Other people came in and made bids to buy the group instead, and ultimately Western Power Distribution, which is an American-owned power network, it already ran the electricity network from Bristol into the southwest of England, and it bought the Hyder Group and took the South Wales electricity business and merged it into its power company. So that was a disappointment. However, that left Western Power owning a water business as well as the electricity company. So they clearly had to sell that business on. So, not taking no for an answer, we reconstituted the company and made another bid to buy Welsh Water, this time from Western Power. Pleased to say, though it wasn't the only bid on the table, and there was lots of excitement along the way. We were bidding against other financial organisations, but ultimately we were successful. I still really don't know why we were successful. I guess a lot of it was down to luck and good timing, because on the face of it, we were not a very strong prospect. We just, again, two individuals. But one of the key things we did was we got a very strong chairman to come and join us. So we had a guy called Lord Terry Burns, who had been permanent secretary at the Treasury, very well-known figure, has gone on to be chairman of lots of companies like Marks and Spencer's and Abbey and Channel 4 at the moment, and so on. Anyway, having somebody with that credibility and prestige was very, very important in being taken seriously on this. I do remember as well, I'd say we did have a bit of a credibility problem on occasions. We had to fill out a form to get a bank account for the new company, and it was a sort of standard form, and it's sort of question number one, how many people work for your company? So the answer was 2. Question number 2 was, do you own your premises? No. Question 3, do you own any assets? 2 laptops, 2 mobile phones. Question 4, do you have an accounting system, computerized accounting system? No. Question 5, what's your estimated first year turnover? £650 million. So that was quite a, again, go for the big. Anyway, ultimately Western Power agreed to sell Welsh Water to us if we could raise the money and we could get the necessary sort of regulatory approvals. So, amazing opportunity, really, something very, very fortunate to have had, that the ability to create a company from a blank piece of paper and then go off and sell that idea. Another piece of good luck, one of the reasons we were able to do this was in 2000, 2001, we're in the very early days of Welsh government. The Welsh Assembly had been created, Kevin, referendum 97 came in 99, is that right? Something like that, I think. So sort of within the first couple of years of Welsh Assembly being there, so we took the idea of a Welsh-based company to all the political parties and the government, and I'm pleased to say that all 4 political parties in Wales backed this idea. It was not a popular idea, I've got to say, with the London government. The Environment Minister in London at the time publicly distanced himself from this, and there was a lot of concern within government that this taking shareholders out of a privatised utility would mean ultimately that it would fail, and therefore the costs and the liabilities would fall back onto government or back onto the customer. So it's a great degree of reluctance from the London government to see this happen, but we got strong support from within Wales, and ultimately the industry regulator, Ofwat, basically said, well, this can go ahead if you can convince the markets to lend the money. And so that was the ultimate challenge, was to get the capital markets to invest nearly £2 billion into a company with no assets and no track record. And I suppose my final sort of business lesson from all this is that though we got nothing behind us whatsoever other than a business model, the business model is a very, very strong one, and we'll talk about that later. So actually, if you've got a strong proposition, you can raise even very large sums of money to finance that if you're determined enough and lucky enough. So that's a bit of the history. 2001, Glas Cymru, the company we created, bought Welsh Water. The way we actually did it was we raised £1.9 billion in bonds, so put debt into the business, and then the following day, we bought that company for £1. So that was, again, a fairly surreal experience, having spent about 6 hours signing legal documents to actually hand over a £1 coin. And that then gave us ownership of Welsh Water with this big pile of debt that we'd taken on in the company. So that's a bit on the background. Just quickly to talk about the model. As I say, blank sheet of paper, how would you go about creating a public utility company like a water company? If you had the choice, what would you do? We sat down and we thought, well, what's the key business driver for this enterprise? What makes a water company different from a retail company or a leisure company or whatever it might be. And we thought that the crucial thing about a water business is that it is there to invest large sums of money in long-term essential infrastructure assets. So pipes, treatment works, pumps, those sorts of things. That's what it's really about, because it's that network of assets, wherever you are in the world, it's that network of assets that ultimately determines whether this is a high-quality public service or not. So our thought was define a business model that will enable us to raise the money for that investment as cheaply as possible, and will enable us to be able to focus on doing the right thing for this business for the long term, rather than being, as it were, driven by short-term financial considerations. And that's, it's not to say that ours is the right way of doing it, but that's the vision that we had. And we'd had experience and of other forms of ownership. I mean, if you're a stock market listed company, then you're always under pressure. Next set of results. If you're hit by some things as a business, you have to then conserve money, so you cut back on investment in order to be able to maintain your payments to your shareholders, perhaps. If you're owned by an infrastructure fund or an overseas equity owner or whatever, again, dependent on dividend stream coming out of the business, change of ownership, change of strategy from your multinational owner could mean that your business decisions are changed. It's very difficult to plan 5, 10, 15 years hence on that basis. So we thought this sort of social ownership model was a really good way to be able to say, we will then, for good or ill, we'll be providing the public service, water and wastewater in Wales and some parts of England. We'll be focused just on that one thing, and we'll be able to plan long-term investment in our networks. And just to give you a sort of a sense for what I mean by that sort of long-term investment, which is something that I think, looking at the attendance list, many of you in this room will know much more about than me, but just as a social problem for us as an urban society in South Wales, we have a sewerage network that was designed more or less 100 years ago, and it was designed to take sewage, the foul effluent from homes and businesses, and also to take away all the rainwater and basically send it off out to sea. That's what it was designed to do. And it was actually a fantastic piece of engineering for its time. All flows down by gravity and out into the Bristol Channel. One stage was a big pipe went out from Cardiff towards Weston-super-Mare, taking all the effluent of Wales towards England. Unfortunately, there's another pipe coming the other way from Weston-super-Mare towards Cardiff, bring all the effluent from England in this direction. But anyway, that's how it was designed. You wind the clock on to today, clearly now all that effluent has to be treated to very high standards. So we're treating not only the sewage effluent of South Wales, but also all that rainwater as well. So we're pumping that around to the treatment works. Wind the clock on another 30 years. What we seem to be seeing in the UK are changing weather patterns. You have, and this is a layman's view of it, but you have the jet stream being much more variable. That brings drier periods, which is a problem for a water company, but it also brings very wet periods as well, which is an even bigger problem for us. So you're getting much more severe storm events. The urban area of South Wales is now much more impermeable than it used to be. There used to be the ability for a large amount of that rain to be soaked up within the environment. Now, people no longer have a front garden. They now have hard standing for their car, for example. So all that water, these severe rainstorms, is going into the sewer network, which was not designed to deal with that much flow. So it is basically flowing out through overflows into the natural environment, or in some cases, even backing up and flowing into homes and businesses. So if you have that sort of perspective of a long-term challenge, changing weather patterns, urbanization, growing population, means that our infrastructure today can't cope with those challenges, you need to be thinking, well, actually changing that sewer network it's not a 5-year project, it's not even a 10-year project, that's a generational project to invest in. We have to be thinking of investing consistently in a prioritized way over 25, 30 years to change the nature of urban drainage in Wales, so that, I'll be long gone by that stage, but those who are running Welsh Water then and their customers, hopefully through our foresight today and investing to address some of those challenges, that will enable them to be able to deal with the challenge of urban drainage in 30 years' time. So that was the sort of reason why we thought a social enterprise, it's a private company in that it raises its money from the private markets. It's not a public company because, well, basically we're not the government, but equally when it was in the government sector, all those long-term investment decisions were basically put off. And the UK has got, in my personal opinion, a track record of not investing in core infrastructure in the way that certain other societies do. So you get things put off for short-term political reasons. Anyway, in our social model, we can go to the markets, we can raise the money for this long-term investment, and we don't have to worry about competing short-term pressures if our parent company decides to sell us and therefore wants to boost profits for a couple of years or whatever it might be. So that was why we went down this social enterprise model. The second feature of it, I think, is that it particularly makes sense for something which is an essential public service like water. Because basically, it is a natural monopoly. Again, many of you will understand the economics of this. A single pipe network, a single set of treatment plants with economies of scale is the norm everywhere in the world. There haven't been competing water pipes in the UK since the sort of, I think it was the 18th century in London when they used to have competing water pipes going down either side of the road. So it's a natural monopoly. It's to provide an essential service that people can't do without. So it seemed to us that if this company was owned not actually by its customers but owned on behalf of its customers, then there would be a much closer commonality of interest between the customers, the business, and also the people who finance that business. So we didn't want to go to shareholders for money, we wanted to go to long-term investors like pension funds who want to be able to invest in a water business for 30, 40, we've even sold 50-year bonds. So in 2000 and whatever it is, 58 or something like that, somebody in my job will be signing off paying that money back to a pension fund. So they wanted that long-term ability to invest. So those are the advantages, long-term perspective and access to long-term finance, and social enterprise really delivering for its customers. And if it earns any profits, if it has any financial surpluses, reinvesting those into the business on behalf of its customers. Much greater legitimacy than if you're constantly arguing about how much of that profit should be reinvested and how much should be taken out of the business for the benefit of your shareholders. So those were the big pluses as we saw it. There is, however, a potential downside to this model, and this is what many critics rightly pointed to, which is, yes, but if you don't have shareholders there, if you're not a business that's motivated by money, how are you going to be a successful, commercial, efficient business long term? What's to stop you getting very satisfied with yourselves, a bit lazy, a bit public sector, if you're coming from that sort of critique point of view? So we also had to think in our structure about how do we respond to that challenge? How do we create a social enterprise that can actually be relied upon to drive itself to be commercial and efficient on behalf of its customers? And some of the things I've referred to here really push us in that direction. So although we're not a listed shareholder-owned company, we apply all the rules of the FTSE 100 companies, the combined code. And crucially, our board of directors is made up of 7 independent directors with a high reputation, whose job it is to make sure that the executive, of whom there are only 2, so we're a bit outnumbered, that those 2 people are, and the rest of the business is driven to perform year after year to really be driving for efficiency into the business. So that was the flip side, that was the challenge. Advantages of being a long-term social enterprise, but how to make sure that we didn't become sort of complacent and comfortable as a consequence. For those who are interested in sort of business models and ownership structures and so on, actually the UK water industry is now something of a sort of a real-world experiment in miniature, because within the water industry in the UK now you have public ownership in Northern Ireland and Scotland. You have privately owned companies essentially in England, and then you have Welsh Water, which is privately owned but social enterprise, so no shareholders, owned on behalf of its customers. So it's actually, I think there's probably some PhDs to be written by people in this room about which of those ownership models is performing better given the relevant strengths and weaknesses. Very interesting as well to note that most of those English companies now are not actually listed on the stock exchange, which was the original 1989 model. There's only 3 that are. All the others, the other 6, are now owned by groups of international financial investors. And that's, again, a really noticeable feature of world capital markets now, that big investment groups, very strong appetite to invest in core infrastructure assets in jurisdictions like the United Kingdom, which are felt to have very strong governance, rule of law, transparency, all those things. So most of the other companies now owned by groups of consortia of overseas funds or individuals. Just to explain a little bit about the company, we provide the water service and wastewater service to this area here. So we're down here in Cardiff. We serve most of Wales, but not all of it. And we serve well into Herefordshire here, into England, and parts of Deeside, which is also in England. The reason, again, for those who are from the sort of the geography sort of discipline, I guess, probably be fairly obvious, because it's based on river catchments. So the idea was that you would have full control from the source of the water through to the disposal of the wastewater within one company area. So hence it doesn't follow the political boundary of England and Wales, it follows the river catchments. We have about 1.5 million customers, serve a population of about 3 million. It's very, very asset intensive, as I was talking about. So if you took the sewer pipes of the business, you could go from Cardiff all the way to Melbourne and back again. And similarly, the water pipe network would go right round the globe. So that's how much infrastructure, how much assets are required to serve just a 3 million population in a relatively rural area like Wales. It's also a big and important business in terms of its economic footprint, socio-economic footprint. Study that we recently commissioned from Cardiff Business School to look at how important is Welsh Water to the Welsh economy. Well, they basically found it's probably the biggest social enterprise in Wales, probably one of the biggest in the UK. It's about the 4th biggest company by turnover within Wales. Our contribution to gross national product of Wales is about £1 billion a year. So our turnover is around 700 million, but then additional economic benefits from having that business owned and operated from within Wales. We employ 2,500 people, which is big for the private sector in Wales, but indirectly as well, you total it all up, about 6,000 jobs within Wales are actually connected to the water industry. And so it is a big business, but it's a social enterprise, so nobody has put money into that business to own it. What we've done is we've built up the balance sheet of the company year after year. So Welsh Water now is a business valued by Ofwat, the regulator, at about £4.5 billion. We have debts of between £2.5 and £3 billion, so the remainder, that sort of 1.6 billion, is actually effectively equity in the balance sheet that is owned on behalf of our customers. And that's the big difference with our model. This is 12 years in, it's taken 12 years to build that up. But whereas we started off, effectively our equity was that £1 coin, today it's actually worth 1.6 billion. And that's because those funds that would have been distributed out to shareholders have largely been retained within the business. We've paid some of it out to customers, I'll come back to that point in a minute, but basically that's built up to make this business a very strong, viable business that can raise money efficiently to back that long-term process of investment. So as a consequence, the gearing level, that's the level of debt relative to your level of your value of your assets. We started off at 93%. But that's now come down to 63%. So actually by the standards of infrastructure businesses, that 63% is not actually a high figure anymore. And the difference, roughly 37%, is owned on behalf of our customers. And in a rather strange irony, though this was considered, probably rightly, to be a rather unusual and risky thing to put forward in 2001, Welsh Water's now got the highest credit ratings of any utility company in the UK. So I think it does demonstrate that a social enterprise can be large and can be financially very strong. On the back of that strong balance sheet, we will be able to commit to long-term investment, 5, 10, up to 25 years plan for the business. Let's just talk to you a little bit about sort of what motivates the people within the business. We've just been doing a roadshow around Wales, talking about the vision for the company. Again, for any business students here, there are differing views on whether a vision is a good thing to have or not, or whether it's whether it's essential, whether it's a nice to have. Within our business, we asked the 2,500 people, and very, very strong feedback that they wanted to have a single clear vision of what it is that Welsh Water stands for, and that would give them a clear statement of how we're different to the other companies that are out there. And the vision, based on input from over 1,000 people from within Welsh Water, huge enthusiasm for this, what the team has come up with is that for us, providing this sort of essential service to customers within Wales and Herefordshire, what we should be about as a company, our task, if you like, what we stand for, we're here to earn the trust of our customers every day. And that's a very simple vision, and it's not conflicted at all. Most company vision statements talk about we need to balance the interest between stakeholders, customers and shareholders and so on. The great advantage of this is it's very, very simple. We only have one set of people we're responsible to, that's the customers, and they rely on us for essential services. I've got here a glass of water. I'm not sure whether it's tap water or not. I have a suspicion it may not be, but we won't mention that. So we've got a glass of tap water here. Looks quite nice. It's definitely not Welsh water. It's not good enough in terms of taste, but it's not too bad. But the point is, you cannot tell whether that product is safe or not. And again, if you think of asymmetries of information, in many product markets, you can go and you can look at a croissant. You can even look at a university department and look at the stats and know, is it a good department or not? With tap water, you cannot just look and taste that and know whether it's safe or not. You actually have to be able to rely on, trust your essential service provider. So I think that's why that vision statement is so strong. We have to have the commitment, the skills, the dedication to make sure that when we send people this essential product, when we're protecting their environment within which they live, that they can rely on us to do so. And again, then a core set of values that really needs to underpin the delivery of that vision. We have to be a very open and honest company. People have to be able to trust what we say to them. I think really, again, if you think about in the UK, many other countries as well, since sort of 2008, 2009, just a whole list of institutions whose sort of governance models have failed. They've lost the support of the public or their customers. You can think of banks, you can think of MPs, you can think of the media, power companies at the moment, etc. So as an organisation, we need to be open and honest in order to maintain the trust of our customers going forward. That's a very, very important feature for us. Also very important to say, particularly for colleagues who work in the business, businesses like a utility business are dangerous businesses. They are big plant and machinery, people moving around all the time around the geography. So safety has to underpin everything else that we do as an organisation. So that's our vision and our values, and I'll just quickly give you some highlights of how we're doing in living up to that vision. And I think what I would probably say is that there's probably quite a lot of good stuff. We're delivering well overall, and we've made a lot of progress. Here, you'll be not surprised to know, is all the good stuff. There's probably some other things where we are not yet at the level of service that we would like to be at. So we still have an awful lot to do in this business to improve it going forward. But just to give you some highlights, we have been reducing bills to customers relative to inflation. That's unusual. Certainly, we've cut our costs, notwithstanding the fact that we're a social enterprise. We've cut our costs more since 2001 than any of the investor-owned companies. So that's quite an interesting sort of feature. The benefit of that flows back to customers in terms of lower bills in real terms, and also that investment program. So we're investing about 1.5 billion in the current 5-year period. And just to sort of give a sense, because that's a sort of huge number, it would mean that for every household in Wales who pay about £400 a year for their service, we're investing about £1,000 for each of those households back into the business each 5 years. And that gives you a sense of just how big the investment numbers are in a sort of a public infrastructure business like this. Water quality, I was safe drinking that tap water because 99.98% of our samples meet the highest World Health Organization samples, tests. Customer satisfaction, consistently over 90%. So very strong endorsement from customers. I'm afraid, to be absolutely honest about it, I suspect some of that is because we're a Welsh business and we're a sort of a not-for-profit, a social type enterprise, and probably customers give us the benefit of the doubt a bit more as a consequence. We don't really want them to do that. We want them to hold us to account to exactly the same standards as they would any other business. But certainly on any measure of customer satisfaction, we're up there with the best companies. But the sort of the extra bit at the bottom there, what customers have had from Welsh Water that they wouldn't have had from anybody else, is that we've returned about £300 million to customers, or we will have done by 2015. And customers would see that in terms of when they have the bill, which is at a level set by the industry regulator, actually we've been charging them less. So that is effectively a dividend back to our customers. We also have help for just over 50,000 households within Wales who are struggling to pay their water bill. Again, big economic and social issue for us within Wales is that we have, again, many of you in the room will know this, one of the lowest sort of household incomes, value added within the UK economy is within Wales. So hence we have lots of customers struggling to pay this essential water bill. So we're able to do something to help those customers. And also where new investment has been required, rather than waiting until the next regulatory review, which is what generally happens to get this endorsed by your regulator, we've been able to accelerate investment. So trying to think of a good example of that. One of our water treatment works, for example, where it's been quite interesting, again, the sort of climate impact. One of the things that people hadn't anticipated was when the acid rain emissions from power stations basically stopped about 10, 15 years ago. That had some quite interesting impacts, one of which was on the nature of upland peat catchments, which some of our reservoirs get water through peat bogs. The changing acid rain content really affected those peat bogs quite dramatically, which meant that the raw water coming through into our works was changing in its nature and therefore creating a different treatment challenge that our works hadn't been designed to deal with. So that's quite an interesting case of an unanticipated consequence of a piece of environmental legislation. Anyway, thankfully we had been monitoring that together with Bangor University, as it happens, and we were able to put in place extra treatment to deal with those changing raw water conditions. Not something that had been anticipated in our previous sort of regulatory plans, but because of the nature of the company we were able to take some of the money that we've been earning on behalf of customers and invest it into that change treatment process. So that's how we think we're doing. If you'll indulge me, it's important to recognise that actually, as an industry, we have some big issues today. A lot of talk about tax within the UK. Most UK water companies do not pay tax. That's largely for legitimate reasons. It's because they invest a lot. But if you have overseas owners and overseas structures and intra-group dividends, you're inevitably open to accusations of avoiding tax by moving money offshore. And again, a feature for a regional business like Welsh Water, even though we have a Welsh media, most people in the UK get their news from national UK media. So when they see things about Thames Water, for example, and its Caribbean intermediary company, they tend to think of Welsh Water as being the same. So that's quite a challenge for us, is to differentiate ourselves from the other water companies, from the power companies, for example, that were on the news this evening again. pleased to say that we do get a lot of supportive coverage within Wales and very much from Welsh stakeholders and organisations. So there is recognition of the fact that we have lowest increase in bills. I think it's for 3 years running. That we are investing long term. We've unveiled a £2 billion investment programme for the next 6 years, investing in things like renewable energy, that urban flooding challenge that I was talking about before, to protect water quality against changing sort of demographics. Again, just as an aside, maybe interesting to some of you, we have threats to water quality being brought into the UK from overseas travel, people going to other countries around the world where there are risks to public health brought back into the UK that we never had here before. So actually the ongoing challenge of maintaining safe drinking water quality, this is something that will evolve over time, so you need to continue to invest to anticipate those challenges. And also the fact that we're a local company, so one of our supplier companies, Daniels, unfortunately went into administration, basically went bust a few months ago. We were able to step in because we're on the spot, didn't have to clear this with anybody else, and secure the jobs of the people who've been working for Daniels, and to make sure they could continue to provide the service that they do in terms of street works for our customers. So plenty still to do, and some big challenges out there, and I'll just sort of highlight 2 or 3 before wrapping up. I mean, the top one really, I think, is something that the UK as a whole is. I think this is going to be a big political issue for the next election, because on the one hand you have years of slow economic growth. The UK economy still far short of its economic potential from 2008 before the financial crash. So a lot of desire to have infrastructure investment as a way of generating economic activity and growth within the UK, as against huge focus on cost of living. And again, you can see that from the power companies in the last few days. Several of the power companies talking about big increases in bills, political response ranging from Ed Miliband talking about price freezes through to John Major talking about windfall taxes on energy companies. So right across the political spectrum, focus on how much do customers pay. And ultimately, if you have private sector infrastructure, it is the customer that ends up paying in the end. Even in the Welsh Water model, we can raise money from the capital markets to spread that out, but we get ultimately our money to pay the interest on those bonds from our customers. So that trade-off between desire for long-term investment in the economy, you can think of power stations, communications, water networks, as against desire to keep down prices to customers following years of falling real wages in the UK, that's a big political issue. And that's what we're working on at the moment, because we have to put forward our proposals for the next 5 years. And I think we will be pushing ourselves very hard, pushing that efficiency agenda very hard to continue with that £2 billion investment programme, but not looking to our customers to have to pay more as a consequence. So keeping the bill as affordable as we can. European environmental regulation I thought might be interesting to, and very happy to take questions on any of these sorts of things, as long as you don't mind if I say I'm not a specialist and I can't answer them. But I do know enough about European environmental regulation to know that that's at quite an interesting point as well, in which, again, my personal opinion, there's quite a trade-off here between environmental regulation wants to go in the right direction, which is to favour much more sustainable, low carbon impact solutions to environmental problems. But the desire to have uniform, easy to monitor rules that apply right across Europe so that you can enforce them, those two things are very much, I think, in opposition at the moment. So for example, come back to my urban flooding example, what we want to do in Wales is to invest in low carbon, sustainable environmental engineering to take that surface water and dissipate it back into the natural environment. That's quite difficult to monitor, that takes quite a long time. The traditional environmental regulation approach would be to say, this outfall must not spill in anything other than this set of parameters. If it does, you're breaking the law. So what that encourages you to do is to build an enormous big concrete tank so that when that flow comes through, it fills up and then you let it back out later. Now, actually, we don't think that is a sustainable and long-term solution, but environmental regulation in Europe, I think, is at an interesting crossroads. Is it going to go down the route of more local, low-impact solutions, but can that be done at the same time as inevitably, therefore, giving more sort of scope to local solutions as opposed to straightforward rules across the whole of Europe that are much easier to enforce? And then within England and Wales as a whole, very interesting for us from our sort of point of view. You have UK government bringing forward a draft water bill, the basic principles behind which are that the best way to take the industry in England and Wales forward is actually to reshape it along the lines of other network utility industries where basically the value chain has been separated, allowing other companies to come in and enter the market at different points and creating competition for new capacity, competition for retail services, things like that. So it's a well-established model. It applies in power in the UK, it applies in railways in the UK, etc. So desire from the UK government to go at least some degree in that direction. On the Welsh government side, they're bringing forward their water strategy in the next few months, and we think that's much less likely to be going down that route within Wales, akin to Welsh government policy around, for example, health sector, education sector, much more stressing a sort of ecosystem services approach, cooperative approach, getting all the parties within a particular water catchment, be they agriculture, local government, Welsh Water, customers, industry, recreational users, getting those partners together to work on a common solution to environmental problems. So quite a difference of fundamental philosophy there. And for us as a business, as I mentioned earlier, straddling the divide, mostly in Wales but some in England, that's quite good. That's going to be sort of devolution case study for us, because there are overlapping powers between the UK government. You have a single regulatory body for England and Wales, and then other powers for the Welsh government. So that's one that we, as of yet, don't really know what that's going to mean for us. Just to share with you on that last point, the sort of Welsh government perspective, just a quick clip from Welsh Government Minister.
What we have in Wales is a made in Wales solution, something which is the envy of people right across the rest of the United Kingdom. Let's not endanger what we have with these experiments.
It's a very clear point of view from Welsh Government, but equally very similar point of view from the Secretary of State, who is the representative of the UK government for Wales. So actually spanning between a Labour government in Cardiff through to David Jones, who's member of the Conservative Lib Dem government in London, again, also talking about the Welsh Water model delivering benefits for customers. So an interesting ideological sort of difference of approach there, which will have, it'll be interesting for us to see how that plays out in terms of the relative jurisdictions and how the law evolves over the next couple of years. So just to finish up, come back to it. Has this been a successful experiment? I'm tempted to say, was it de Tocqueville? I can't remember, with the French Revolution, when he was asked, what do you think of the French Revolution? Well, it's far too early to say. If I'm setting out for you that this is a 50, 100-year sort of business, you can't tell even within 12 years whether it's been successful or not. But the model we have, that's what enabled this to happen in the first place, is a very simple one. And I think all successful businesses ultimately have a very simple business model, be that to put a good product on the table for your customers or whatever it may be. This is our simple business model, and it is really by focusing on service and affordability to our customers, no competing pressures. That is reflected in good reputation in terms of regulatory performance measures, strong credit rating, because credit rating agencies, investors, do not want underperforming companies with risk around them. So if we have strong reputation, that means we can raise the money we need for that investment over long term and at a lower financial cost. That means we can invest long term in the business, but without needing to put up the bills to customers. And if we use that investment wisely, investing in our assets, investing in our people, investing in new systems and processes, then that in turn should feed back into better service and better value for money for our customers. So hopefully that is a virtuous circle. It's delivered quite a bit over the first 12 years, and I very much hope it will carry on doing so for many years to come. So thanks very much for that. Very happy to take any questions.